To the polls in 1 week's time to vote for their new president.
Current U.S. President Barack Obama and Governor Mitt Romney are neck and neck in their bid to win America's highest office. So what impact will a new president have on the Middle East?
And do Americans really care about foreign policy? Or are they more focused on what's happening domestically? Well, joining us now in the studio to help guide us through these questions is Taufiq Rahim, a political analyst and the director of GlobeSight. Taufiq, welcome to the new season.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Of course, now, big question on the world's mind right now, obviously, what's going to happen in the new elections. Looking regionally, the question is obviously how it's going to impact us and impact our foreign policy. When you look at, I guess, the American opinion as of the moment, 2 bloody wars in just so many years, and yet we're still seeing poll after poll say that they don't really put a lot of emphasis on foreign policy. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think this election, given the situation of the economy in the last few years, is really about domestic issues. But that doesn't mean that foreign policy doesn't play a role. And we've seen the assassination of the U.S. ambassador in Libya become a big and critical issue, replayed over and over again in an attempt by the Republicans to kind of hit at Obama. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, but it's probably not going to be the deciding point for the large majority of Americans who are going to the polls.
Now, back in 2009, Barack Obama made a beautiful speech focusing on the Middle East, saying that he really wants to focus on cooperation, I guess working together with the region a lot more, talking a lot about working with a mutual understanding and respect. I think he said he wants Muslims to understand that Americans are not the enemy. Do you think he's been successful with this?
Well, I think he came out with this partnership that he announced in Cairo, and since then that partnership has gotten muddled, and I think in many ways derailed because of a lot of developments that have happened in the region, including the series of Arab revolutions and uprisings that occurred last year, in which the U.S. was really caught off guard and had to adjust on the fly. In addition to that, they had the situation in Iran in 2009 with the Green Movement, and they didn't know how to, respond to that. Do you make a partnership with the governments? Do you make a partnership with the people? What is really the clarity of those set of policies? So today, if you look at President Obama, it's unclear whether he has, let's say, one direct approach to the entirety of the Middle East, and really you have to go case by case and see how he's responded to each situation.
Looking, of course, then at the other candidate, Governor Romney, he initially came out, looked very hawkish, recalling George W. Bush and sort of the neoconservatives in his policy with regards to the region. Now he seems to have backpedaled a little bit and stepped back a little bit from that. What's your take on Romney's foreign policy?
Well, I think it's very difficult to ascertain how the president will rule just from how he's behaving, particularly in the primary elections, which we know is geared towards the base, but also in the main foreign policy and other debates during the actual presidential campaign. If we think back to George W. Bush, when he was running in 2000, he was actually supported by a large number of Muslim Americans and Arab Americans because he opposed 2 things, secret detention, and he opposed nation building. And so going into countries and taking them over and doing nation building because of the Bosnian War in the 1990s. Well, we saw how George W. Bush ended up ruling. He ended up invading Iraq and, of course, partaking in probably the largest example of nation building since World War II for the U.S. And, of course, secret detention went on a spike with the Patriot Act in the aftermath of 9/11. So we really have to look at what are the undercurrents for these candidates. And I think when you look at President Romney versus President Obama, he will have to play to his base in his first term. And so I do think there will be reverberations of that when he's looking at policies towards Iran and particularly towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Whereas for President Obama, he's not going to be worried about a second term. And I think we will see actually a different President Obama when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, still perhaps hawkish on Iran, but having a little bit more leeway to kind of pursue what are some of the intrinsic undercurrents of many in his administration in terms of his policies.
Actually, I wanted to focus on what you were saying there about Iran. They've obviously had some different stances, and Iran has always been a big challenge for the past 4 U.S. administrations. But this time we've seen Obama really focusing on the sanctions, saying that they are being effective. We've seen Romney a little bit of a different turn, certainly more aggressive, and more recently he's done a bit of a 180. Even so, you have to wonder if Romney does win the seat, does that mean an attack on Iran?
I don't think it means an attack on Iran. He definitely has calibrated himself, understanding that Americans are wary of war, so he doesn't want to appear too hawkish in the debates. And in many ways, their policies have seemed similar. But let's not forget that Mitt Romney is friends. He was colleagues at BCG with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, and they have an affinity. And there's an affinity between the Republican and right-wing establishment in Israel. So it's not that one will be pro-Israel and the other will be anti-Israel. They'll likely be pro-Israel and very hawkish on Iran, both of them, but it's the degree to which. And I do think Romney is always going to err on the side of being more hawkish, and Obama perhaps will be a little bit more balanced. But that's not to say that Obama doesn't have an aggressive foreign policy. He's increased dramatically drone attacks in Pakistan, in Eastern Horn of Africa, and also not close down Guantanamo Bay and things like that. So it's not so clear of a demarcation.
I want to, I guess, follow on from what you're talking
Sure.
a little bit about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, obviously an issue that's near and dear to the hearts of many people here in the region. Much of what Obama's done with regards to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been lip service in his first term, nothing in terms of any real action. Do you think that would change if he was reelected, obviously, without having to worry about that reelection? You mentioned, obviously, the different attitude of the second term.
I do think so. I do think there will be a little bit of a change. And he's going to have so many critical issues to deal with, such as Iran, such as the situation in Egypt, and how that's going to unfold in Libya, and of course Syria, which is the most complex issue that he still continues to face and will face in the beginning of next year. That the Palestinian-Israeli conflict almost in a strange way becomes an easier issue to deal with, almost a way where you can have some traction and some movement, even though it is extremely intractable. So I do think he's going to focus a little bit more attention on that where he can, but definitely the more complex challenges that he will face will be in Syria and other locations.
Absolutely. Certainly going to be a very interesting final result. One we are going to be covering on the show. Taufiq, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you, and let's see who actually wins.
Wait, can I,
We'll
quickly before we go,
Sure.
who are you tipping?
I do think Obama, it's his election to lose, and with the hurricane, actually, I think that's going to impact his chances for the better. But it is an extremely close election.
Team
So
Romney. Well,
indeed.
thank you for letting us know.
Thank you.